Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Vox session number 6. Yes, we are here today welcoming the amazing Mr. Rob Spalton to our Vox eSpeaker program. Rob is an alumnus from quite a few years ago now. He's a sensational young man, a brilliant trumpet player, an outrageously good teacher. He also has his own company that manages instrument repairs and servicing. He's been down in Birmingham for half of his life. He's played at festivals all over the world, and he's now, I think he's now based in London, and he's going to be telling us a little bit about his journey and how he got there. So good evening, Roberto.
Hello. Thank you very much. It's really nice to see you guys again. There's some, it's genuinely like, oh, lovely to see some familiar faces.
It really is. And, to be perfectly honest, Rob, we've always got on really well. And, I've really valued your support, and I think we get on quite well as a team. And, it is lovely to have you here. And I was hoping you'd be able to start off by telling the listeners how you've got to where you are, really, your journey, your school, your education, and what you've done.
Sure. Well, I tried to jot a few thoughts down earlier to kind of make it all chronological, and it just kind of snowballed, and it started to get quite difficult to read. So I'm just going to kind of spew at you for a minute, if that's all right. So growing up, I had a relatively unmusical family. My folks were both DJs, so I'd wake up to either the Beatles or the Monkees or Michael Jackson, depending, most weekends. I started playing quite young, and I was never particularly good, which I'm sure that you and Stu and Tim will all attest to. We had a brilliant music department at John Port School, and a really great sense of community within the band that I think that's the crux of it all. At school, I kind of was always a bit of a small fish when it came to trumpet playing. And in Emijo, which was, later Hot House, I was definitely a very small fish in a lineup of people that included people like, George Hogg, Stu Barker, Sean Barker, Stu, Andy Allen, Ben Hoblin, Ted Smith, Tom Dennis. The list just goes on. I learned about the county ensembles when I was only in sixth form, so I kind of sat for a couple of years on principal, which I totally didn't really deserve to be. After which I thought, you know what, I want to take a gap year. There's still a heap of stuff that I want to explore kind of about the trumpet before I felt that I was kind of putting my best foot forward and ready to go into the music college process. I didn't particularly care about classical music, if I'm honest, and didn't really particularly care about jazz music. I just didn't understand it. I just wanted to learn how to play the trumpet. That was always the goal, the long-term goal, to be playing at a decent level. I applied to most of the conservatoires, and I was a complete bag of nerves in all of them. Yeah. I ended up politely walking out of my academy audition because I had James Watson, Bob Farley, and Rod Franks. It was just horrible. Terrifying. It was a roasting beyond belief. And I thought anywhere that I walk into that makes me feel like that, it's probably not for me. The Birmingham Conservatory had a way better feel about it. Plus, I could see myself setting up there after college, which for me was a big plus, especially being kind of in relative proximity to Derby. Yeah. Meant I could keep working for a start and earn a couple of pennies even with you. College was a really mixed bag. The conservatoire itself, I loved every minute of it. It was great, but I'm not entirely sure I fitted in. I had no real musical classical repertoire in my background, and I didn't sound like, or frankly didn't have much of an interest in sounding like a classical trumpet player. The thought of kind of on the other side of the fence rattling off like a really long extraordinary line of something in a jazz gig just didn't really appeal either. My first few teachers were more or less wombles, and this combination plus the constant hoops that you're pushed through in music college, of kind of solo performance, orchestral repertoire, and sectionals really put my chops in a relatively horrible position. I was practicing for kind of hours a day, and both my confidence and playing plummeted. A lot of what I was being told was just oversimplifying problems. The whole just do more lip slurs or push more or more arbon, which is just causing a ton of problems. This led me on a bit of a crusade, really, to learn as much as you kind of humanly can about the trumpet, how it works, what it does, why some things work for her and not him, that kind of thing. And so, in my final months at the conservatoire, I met a chap called Percy Pursglove, who is genuinely one of the most inspirational guys I've ever met. And he's just a dude. He's a don. And rather than trying to kind of add stuff to my technique, you should do this because he just told me what I didn't need to do, which was that really worked wonders. So yeah, in college there was a guy called Joe Broughton, a tutor and lecturer who ran a folk ensemble, which was creatively called Joe Broughton's Conservatoire Folk Ensemble, which was just like the most amazing and energetic and happy melting pot of some of the most brilliant people I know. I even met my wife actually in the group, although we weren't obviously married at the time. With these guys, we played loads of festivals like Towersey and Shambhala and Green Man and the like, and ended up playing some small group brass section stuff with a group called Fairport Convention, which was really cool because we got to play their festival. Now, most festivals have like a myriad of stages. They have a ton of stages that are all kind of back to back in different areas. But Cropley's just got one massive stage, which unlocks to an audience of about 30,000 people. So that was like a pretty big, yeah, great. Music's really cool. Wake up call. And around this kind of time, I started to think about what would happen after college. And even if I had a gig or two every weekend, I still had a working week to fill. So I figured I needed a skill set that would kind of give me relatively flexible hours, paid relatively well, and was quite interesting. So I applied to do a course in musical instrument repair, which is something that kind of from a family of engineers has always been kind of fun, kind of interested in me. And around a similar time, I was asked to apply to Repton and Fulmark schools, which is great. So at that point, I had a couple of gigs coming in. I had some teaching, and I had this repair thing I was interested in. And then I was offered a lot of gigs by a group called By the Rivers, which were kind of a Brit pop reggae group, which coincidentally were run by the sons of the sax player of the Beautiful South, if anybody remembers Beautiful South. These guys were great, and we traveled, most major cities in the UK, did a good few stints in Europe. We supported people like the Wailers of Bob Marley fame, and Selector and the Specials and stuff like that. So yeah, memories of going to a place like Amsterdam with a reggae band don't leave you quickly. And rocking up to lectures after like 2 hours sleep and really pretending to care about Gabrielli's use of Corey Spezzati is just like, oh no. So yeah, we played a ton of festivals, including Glastonbury and some of the big ones. I think I wore more wristbands than socks that year. The band eventually split up, and Jordan, the founder and drummer of By the Rivers, formed Easy Life, if anybody knows Easy Life, if anybody follows the charts. Anyway, we're not repairing in my bedroom or gigging. I filled my time practicing or teaching and realized that I really enjoyed the teaching side of things. My first year out of college, I was working for Repton School, Fulmark, Derby Grammar School, Coventry Performing Arts Service, Hydesville Tower School, and Highclere Schools, which comes with it a certain amount of financial stability, which kind of also allowed me to gallivant off in the summer and do some little festivals. Now, from where I'm sat, everything in the music industry seems to move in quite a slow state of flux. You never really find yourself doing the same thing for particularly long. So I picked up a heap more gigs of like traveling tribute things, shows and function stuff and some arty projects, and binned off some of the less fun, more faffy teaching. Plus repairing was going really well and it fit like a glove into kind of gig days. And then Theon Davis, the former director of music at Derby Grammar School and a truly phenomenal person, left the school, and Nick, her successor, offered me a job as assistant director of music or lower school director of music. I can't really remember which. So on top of that, I was also planning and teaching a load of classroom lessons at Derby. Anyway, Repton at a similar time promoted me to head of brass, which was hilariously good fun. And I particularly enjoyed conducting the school's concert band. So when a mate of mine asked if I wanted to take over the conducting of the Central England Concert Band, who were formerly his group, I kind of jumped at it. I thought that'd be really good fun, which it was. It was amazing, and I found that musical direction was a really exciting new form of expression that you by default, by listening to loads of stuff and by listening to music and playing music, you already have all these opinions, but you've never realized that you can express it and craft it in such a big way. So between playing, teaching, conducting, and repairing, I was kind of working flat out constantly. When I was invited to join Percy Purcell's old group, my teacher's old group, The Destroyers, which is a band that with all my socials I've been particularly in awe of for years. They're a mega folk band from Birmingham who are hilariously overqualified, and really kind of sated my appetite for folk music. Properly love folk music. Especially on the trumpet, which I think it's just fascinating. If you haven't and you've got time, check out an album called 5 Countries by Neil Yates. It's nuts. Anyway, with the Destroyers, we recorded a couple of albums and played some incredibly fun gigs. Plus, it was back to Glastonbury, but this time on a much, much bigger stage, the Avalon stage, if anybody cares, which is between people like Will Young and Corin Bailey Ray to like 6,000 glittery face-painted festival goers. In the band, I met some wicked people, including Richard Shrewsbury, who's one of my best mates, along with a sax player back from the folk ensemble. together we started the Ministry of Brass, which is a horn section. Our big selling points are that we've clocked loads of hours playing together in loads of different styles. So together, sorry, some really strange noises just happened outside. I think it's a cat. Anyway, yeah, and our other big selling point is that we've all got completely by chance the same recording setup at home, so we all end up sounding the same when we record remotely as well. Together we recorded a couple of albums with the Electric Swing Circus, if anybody knows them. We're doing another one this month, actually, and generally played a ton of weddings and kind of backing horn section stuff. Anyway, Rich started working at the Conservatory and invited me to be principal trumpet of his shiny new learning, education and participation ensemble, which is an amazing group of kind of super energetic folks who run around the country playing and inspiring kids in every which way we can. Basically to promote music in higher education and to give music services around the country a bit of a kickstart. Through this, Rich made me guest lecturer at the Conservatoire, which is, I'm not sure if it's a role or a paycheck thing, but either way, I'm taking it. Either way, this work, which is still a pretty regular part of my diary, showed me just, frankly, how wicked Hot House is, provided it's still as good as it was when I was in it. I imagine it's even better. You know, just the whole kind of the energy, the community, the excitement of playing in what feels like much more relevant music with relatable and exciting peers and staff is utterly invaluable. So I'd go as far as to say, as the Hot House, if it's anything like it back in the day, it must be in the top few music organizations in the country. And that's not me buttering you guys up. Like, I've worked with a really good chunk of them now. Anyway, throughout all this, other gigs would come in, gig on kind of principal in Birmingham Philharmonic here, or a big band thing there, and a ton of weddings. It's just death by superstition. Anyway, the constant barrage of teaching emails were really detracting from playing, and I quickly realized that I still had a whole lot more I wanted to learn about the trumpet that I wasn't able to with so much work around my neck. So I packed in Repton and Derby Grammar and breathed kind of a huge sigh of practice-based relief. The same week, I was approached to take over conducting the People's Orchestra, which is another big kind of Birmingham community ensemble. And my first gig with them was conducting their contribution to the Commonwealth Gold Coast Birmingham handover, which is watched by like over 1 billion people. It's nuts. So if you want debut gig nerves, that is where to go. Anyway, about a fortnight after resigning Repton, disaster struck. I went into hospital with some chest pain, ended up collapsing directly onto my face. And for any trumpet player, this should have been a death sentence, really. I had 2 very, very deep lacerations to my top lip and a ton of stitches. So pretty much the most important 5 millimeters of my body was just knackered. I spent my life working towards becoming a trumpet player, and I just couldn't make a sound for about 6 months, despite trying every day. Anyway, luckily, I built up this repairing and the teaching and the conducting to fall back on, all of which were going really well. My first playing gig back was the main stage at Boomtown Festival with Electric Swing Circus, which is it's a huge gig, and I really struggled with the anxiety of performing there. My face just felt completely different. I couldn't kind of rely on it to respond in certain ways, and when you're under pressure, nobody plays the same, and you kind of default back into all these different things, these different kind of tricks that have worked for you in the past, and they just didn't work. It's horrible. However, on my crusade to figure out how the trumpet works, the whole system works, I'd spent ages doing the Maggio system, which all trumpet players should look up, and blissfully that method was almost completely coincidentally written by a guy who smashed his face in, which was absolutely invaluable for someone who just smashed the face in. So I'm playing again now and regularly going out with a whole heap of acts and touring theatre shows and the old tribute thing, and the Destroyers, who have now taken over kind of gig management of. I've packed in all the conducting and repairing for the time being, as I've just moved to London. I'm really enjoying playing for the moment. So that's kind of where I am. I've got together a couple of little nuggets of advice that I didn't realize I really believe in. So if you'll humor me for these.
Yeah, go for it.
There's a couple of these constants that just get a little bit more obvious the older I get. The first one is music is music. And anybody who categorizes it into jazz or classical is either doing it to sell you an academic course, or they're just painfully naive. There's a time and a place for all music, and what you get from it will be completely different to somebody else. So try not to judge folks by their musical taste. Second of all, your creative output is limited or equal to your creative input. If you only ever listen to one thing, that's all you'll ever sound like. Ultimately, music is a catalyst for emotion, and it will either help you or stop you from feeling a certain way. Given that we make decisions and respond in conversations based on how we feel, whatever you do, surround yourself in music that makes you happy or interested. So by all means, turn the radio off and stop listening what you're told to and listen to stuff because you want to. Take on, gigs-wise, everything and be nice to everybody. At music college, you meet a whole ton of snobs, music snobs. They won't play it unless it's Mahler or Beethoven. And it is laughable how many of those guys actually get an orchestral seat or any work in the long term because they've not been building bridges. And then they get out the other side of this big machine and realize no one's going to hand them anything. It's not the long-term goal that will be fun and surprising. It's the cool stuff that happens on your periphery. So be aware that it's all about the journey and pick up things that look exciting here, not just there. Next thing, practice is repetition with the goal of improvement. Graft is utterly useless without a clear trajectory and a certain amount of pragmatism. That whole "you can be anything you want" argument is fine, but the question is how. What do you want, how, and where are you going to get it from? Are questions you should ask yourself pretty regularly. A good teacher and a good player are not the same thing. If you want a car fixed, you don't go to Lewis Hamilton or Vettel. You go to Keith, the mechanic down the road with his sausage and egg bap. Equally, if you want a racing driver, I probably wouldn't ask Keith. So who you go to lessons for and for what purpose is really important. I go to see as many different trumpet players as I can, as regularly as I can. Some will give you a load of gigs at some point and be reliable depths, and some are on that Zeus tier that you go and see to kind of saturate and learn everything you can from them. And don't be hacked off if they've no idea how to mold you into a Maynard overnight. That just doesn't happen. Finally, without sounding lame, that whole "you are good enough" conversation is really important. I've sat for years with this really toxic big black cloud in my head saying, "Oh, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough." And frankly, it's not very healthy, even if you think that's what your motivation is. You are as good as your practice and your attitude have made you, and you shouldn't beat yourself up about that. If you need to adjust your work ethic, then do it, but don't beat yourself up about it. So yeah, they're my little anecdotes of advice that I wish somebody had told me a good few years ago. And that's how I've kind of bumbled and stumbled to where I am. I'm not entirely sure where I am, to be honest with you.
Honestly, Rob, it's stunning. What you're saying is just, it's wonderful. And, everybody, if you've got a question for Rob, regardless of what it is, whether it's a festival question or a, music college question, or, how to cope when you go through having an injury, anything can go in there, and we'll go through those in a minute. But I mean, the things, because you've been super honest, and I've really appreciated that. You've gone through when you're at the academy, if it's not right, just walk out. Great advice. We all suffer a little bit from imposter syndrome. Am I good enough to be here? Is this really meant for me? I think one of the things that you've just said, about be a nice guy in music, you meet the same people going up as you do coming down. So if you're getting better and better and better, and you're not particularly nice to those guys on the way up, when you have a fall and you start coming down, they're going to be the same guys that you meet on the way down. So, for our kids who are going to meet new people and the right sort of people, you want to be respectful and kind to everybody, because at some point you'll see them again. You might be 80 years old and you're looking for somebody to give you a quick gig because, you're just still trying to pay off the debts from the COVID crisis. It's really important to learn those things. And I think that's something that as a person you've done really well. And, and music's been the vehicle for you to learn these things. If you had to choose one thing that was the standout moment, either for a life lesson or for an actual thing you've done where you just went, I mean, it might be the conducting for 1 billion people. I totally get that. Is there, could you say there's one bit, when kids come to you, because you're a great teacher and, we would love you to be one of ours. It's a case of, what is that moment that did it for you? That's like, I really do want to keep doing this trumpet, regardless, my face is gone. What is it?
I really don't know. I think there's a feeling, there's a buzz that you get from being on stage that, we had back in the Mackworth Hotel. We had it back in Murray Park, and that's the same feeling that permeates for me performance, like every time I get on stage. And I've done some horrendous gigs, don't get me wrong, but predominantly festival gigs, big fun gigs where that everybody is there to have a good time and you are helping facilitate that, and you are communicating how you feel With that for me is the real bonus wherever it is. So standout gigs that have been like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. Again, Cropperty Festival, playing that, not once but twice to like 30,000 people was just nuts. Um, Not from a look at how many people there are in front of me kind of sense, but just for like how brilliant is the music we're all making on stage together. You could almost take out the audience completely, and the gig that we played from that stage was just brilliant. Similarly with the Destroyers, we've done some really great stuff there. We've done Swingamajig a couple of years ago. We did Moseley Folk Festival in between Kate Rusby and what's the other one, Laura Marling, and that was just absolutely incredible. Standout gigs would have to be those two, I think.
And which is nice, really, because Eleanor has just asked, if you had to recommend, or if you could recommend a festival which was great for kids to attend, which one of the ones that you've been to have you thought, this is just nice? Nobody's judging anybody. Nobody's making comments about what you listen to, what you like, whether it's folk, pop, classical, jazz. Nobody's pigeonholing it. It's just great live music. Which one would be a good one for families and kids?
Families and kids, I think the first one that I'd jump to would be Green Man Festival in the Brecon Beacons. It's a really, really lovely, happy festival that's just, everybody there is just great. It's really, really great. There's no animosity. There's none of that edginess that you get at some of the kind of grungier ones like kind of Boomtown or any of that. It's just pure happy family fun. It's great.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Tim's just asked the question, which, we've done some work on recently with some of our staff, but strategies for coping with anxiety. When you went back on the stage and it all, feels really strange. A lot of our kids they get that feeling when they play the last post, or they get that feeling when they're doing their A-level recital. How did you cope with it?
I didn't. I think that's the trick, not to pretend that you're either coping or not. It's just to do it. And I mean, that whole prepare to fail, prepare to thing quote, that really holds up. For me, practice comes from, performance anxiety comes from an uncertainty of not knowing whether or not what I'm about to do is going to work. So putting the graft in beforehand and not doing it all at the last minute seems to be that's the linchpin for me. Also recognizing that, at the end of the day, we're musicians and we're not consultant surgeons. We're not literally cutting into somebody's heart and about to kill them or something if we play the last C to G lip flex of last post go wrong. Context is really important. At the end of the day, the world keeps on turning, and the world will keep on turning after every exam, and it will keep turning after every performance. And at the end of the day, if it's that fear of I'm going to mess up, that's what kind of permeates your performance. Everyone will be able to hear that, really, and it won't enable you to perform at your best. You've literally just got to kind of blindside it and get it out of the way. And that sounds like it's a really blasé thing to say, and it's much easier to say than it is to do. But typically, I find that surrounding myself by people that I'm performing, surrounding myself wise, I mean, playing next to people that you trust, playing next to people that know you will do a good job, and even if you don't do a good job that day, they'll say, "Nice one, mate. I know that you'll do that. You'll smash it next time."
That's find your own happiness, isn't it? It's been really careful to do that. It happened with me. My first year, I crashed and burned for my first year, and a professor, Dr. Tamblin, said, "What are you worried about, John? It's not third world debt. You're not going to die." And they put it all in context, and that was the beginning of the path forward then. And I really hear what you're saying. That chimes. We've got a lovely question from George and John. They are interested in knowing about Birmingham and London. In the sense of, I think, they're considering Birmingham Conservatoire. So they're interested in, which do you feel? Why did you choose Birmingham? And, how does that compare to London?
I think everything changes all the time. And I think the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire now is in really, really good shape. I think it's doing a lot of really good things. And I think particularly it's standing in the community and its outreach is excellent. Its jazz course has always been pretty legendary, and I think now its classical course, frankly, is coming up to meet that now. I'll be really honest with you. The problem with the Birmingham course has always been that there's so little music going in, kind of classical wise, in the wider West Midlands, that it's very difficult to. It's a very saturated market very quickly, and people tend to think that by going to London, they'll somehow turn out better because there's more opportunities available. The opportunities are still there in Birmingham. You've just got to know to look for them. absolutely. I would wholeheartedly recommend going to Birmingham completely. Is it to say it's better or worse than London? No, not at all. If you go to any conservatoire, you'll find coasters and you'll find grafters. The assumption that you get in and you turn out with these brilliant chops is completely a lie. It's time to dedicate wherever you go. And 99% of the teachers are all traveling between the same conservatoires anyway. So bottom line is choose a place on not what facilities it necessarily has, or not on what kind of almost what teachers are there, but that's not true based on the teachers there. Pick a place based on where you can see yourself being, because the network that you're going to rely on for gigs needs to be there when you graduate. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can word that a lot better, but I don't know how. Basically, go to London, you'll find people that doss around and don't do any work. Go to Birmingham, you'll find the same. It doesn't matter. If you're prepared to go to a music college and put the graft in, you'll make a lot of friends, you'll have a lot of good fun, and you'll make some brilliant music.
Yeah, very well said. And just the last one, this comes from Elved, who's interested in, it's a portfolio career. A musician juggles lots of different aspects. From a mum or dad who might be working, maybe as a teacher who's only got one kind of direct employer. We have lots of stakeholders in our lives as musicians. How do you, balance and manage that portfolio career? Keep all the plates spinning.
With great difficulty, frankly. There's no easy way to answer that question. You just got to put the graft in. If that means that you answer all your emails at 11:30 at night and schedule them to send at 8:30 in the morning, then fine. But yeah, there's no shortcut around that. I mean, graft is graft. It's just a case of you take on how much you're prepared to put in. And if you excel at anything, there's that old quote, isn't it? If you do more than expected, people will always do more than expected back. That's probably not the quote, but it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
We always like to sort of try and reminisce about happy memories that we had when we were back in band time, back in Emma Joe time. And I had a good chat with Stu earlier on this afternoon, and we had a few there which we particularly liked. Mine was, you might not remember, but you wrote a piece of music for the band, and the sweet. It was genuinely horrendous, but the fact that you wrote it and printed it off and we tried it, it spoke volumes. Fearless, and you really you carried that on through. And I loved it when you conducted our hot shots on Saturday mornings. We were, we saw what you were all about there: the passion, the energy, the kindness, and the no judging things. We really, really appreciate that. Have you got anything that sticks out from the past which you can share? That's before the watershed.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's the little stuff. I think it's the camaraderie we had in the horn section, of just basically all being under the hammer of John hacking at us for not doing mixed Lydian cycle of fifths in thirds at 120 BPM. Or just that really, I don't know, that really happy, grungy feeling of kind of leaving Littleover Community School in the pouring rain, having just tanked out Admiral's Horn for 20 minutes, or Dancing Men or something. Yeah. No memory sticks out, but I mean, John, when we got to Disneyland Paris back in 2003 or 4, more or less within 5 minutes of getting to Disneyland Paris, through the back door so that Mickey Mouse could have his fag. John nutted a ball and it went straight through a window. And we had to kind of just move the whole group on really quickly before that.
Good times, good memories. And so, I mean, that probably brings us to the end. I'm sure Rob won't mind if anybody's out there and they would like to reach out to him, specifically whether it's about the music courses or anything else. He's always been a great connector of people, and he's a really, really lovely guy. If you want to get in touch and send them to me, I'll send them on, or if Rob's got a LinkedIn page or anything like that, I'm sure he won't mind if you send those things through. So on behalf of everybody at Hot House, thanks for being our Vox 6 guest. We think you're amazing, and we'll look forward to seeing more great things from you in the future soon.
Oh, thank you so much. Everybody. It's been really lovely to hang out.
Thanks, Rob, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.